Hello, and welcome back to Dutiful Future. Yes, I am once again in a different location. Move past it, it's fine. Today, I am delighted to be joined by a returning guest, Oliver Willis from the American Independent, formerly of Media Matters for America. Oliver, hello. Thanks for coming
Hello.
back.
Thanks for having me again.
One of the few people who has experienced my intros and decided, you know what I need is more of that. Uh,
I
so,
need more of it. I need it more and more. Like I've only had it a couple times now, so
I mean, look, once you start, you never, you just can't stop. It's what it is. It's what it is.
that-
But so we actually spoke nearly 2 years ago now. This was from the transition from Trump to Biden.
yeah.
Now it's 2 years later, and I thought it would be great to catch up again, have a chat about Biden's presidency so far, and most importantly, what is happening in the Republican Party, why it's tearing itself apart, and why we both love it so much. So let's just jump straight in here.
Sure.
Very recently, the most important thing that's been happening is it took 15 votes for Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker of the House. Why was this? What does this mean? And why is it so funny? Please just give us an overview from your
Yeah.
perspective.
Well, I mean, it was apparently it was the first time it's taken this many ballots in 100 years for the incoming party to pick its new leader. And basically, what happened is that first of all, the Republicans didn't have the margin that they thought they were going to have coming into this new session of Congress. Like you go back to mid 2021, even early last year, they thought they were going to have a 40, 50 seat majority. They thought, they talked about this big red wave coming in. And then, through the course of the last year, where they had things like the Roe versus Wade getting thrown out, and just sort of, to be honest, like overall incompetence from the Republican Party. They picked a bunch of candidates that had no shot in hell of winning a lot of these races that were picked by Trump. So basically, they took over the House, which is still, a win is a win. Like, give that to them, but it was not the big
Yeah.
tsunami they were expecting. But now we're seeing how that's playing out now in this, basically the first week of the new year, is that they had this tiny little margin to play with in their leadership election. And generally what's happened in the past with both parties is that, it's sort of a rubber stamp. Like you won, and then whoever's the leader of your party just,
Yeah.
kind of waltzes in to become the new speaker. It happened with Pelosi, it happened with Paul Ryan with them in the past. It just, you
Mhm.
just sort of do it and go along with it. But with Kevin McCarthy, he first of all, he's not very well liked within his own party. Like it actually, it's kind of funny. I feel in a strange way that more Republicans dislike him than Democrats. Like Democrats just kind of dislike him because he's
Yeah.
the leader of the Republican Party. But like, there's not like if you go back in history with people like Newt Gingrich, who are like
Mm.
loathed by Democrats as the leaders of the Republican Party, like there is not a Newt Gingrich level of dislike for
Right.
McCarthy. It's just sort of he comes across, I think, to most Democrats as a sort of a generic Republican to be, disliked for his positions.
Mhm.
And he comes across as a little smarmy, but it's not like this, burning rage. Whereas like someone like, Matt Gaetz, the Republican from Florida, he loathes Kevin McCarthy
Yeah.
in a way that like I feel like most Democrats don't even loathe Kevin McCarthy. And so because he had this tiny little margin to play with, it only takes a few, and it basically took about 20 of them
Yeah.
to oppose him. And so you had this really hilarious display of like, and it was really strange to me because, Congress is where people make a little, backroom deals and, vote for
Mhm.
me. I'll give you this committee assignment. I'll do this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, it seemed like he wasn't really doing any of that to advance. And so they just kept calling these votes. And then you would watch the vote count. And then it was kind of a funny thing where generally in Congress, they vote, by electronic device. But
Mm.
for the leadership election, they do it by voice vote. And so
Ah.
it was this funny thing where like they're asking 435 people over and over again, and everyone has to vote, and say who they're supporting, and it just goes
Mhm.
back. And so it was just this constant rejection. And then they would show footage of McCarthy in the corner of the House, and he had this weird like smile, like as his party's voting against him. And then you had the Democrats who, I criticized them a lot, but they had a lot of unity where they voted for
Yeah.
all Hakeem Jeffries every time, over and over. There were no dissents on the Democratic side, which, I mean, as you know, you follow our politics, you know that usually the
Yeah.
Democrats are a mess when it comes to things like that. But they stuck together. And so, yeah, like so McCarthy has come, and eventually he did get there after 15 votes. Yeah. It was like the middle of the night. I think was it Friday night or Saturday night? And it's like he became speaker, and it was one of these things where he was trying to take a victory lap, but it's just like, you literally are taking a victory lap after your party has been mocking you. And I mean, you compare it to a one-to-one comparison. Like when Pelosi was elected speaker this last time, I mean, it was literally just boom, Pelosi speaker. Let's get on with this agenda. We got a Democrat in the way.
You almost wouldn't know that there was an election. It's just, oh, the leader of the party becomes the speaker.
And generally, these aren't news. Generally, they're just like a kicker at the end of the news, like, oh, the party picked this person to be their speaker. Like, it's just, and so it became this, I don't know how long it's going to last, the hangover is going to last, but he doesn't have a big margin to play with. And I think that, in addition to like their extremism, which we can get into, that's going to be one of the problems that they have to deal with, is that he's not great at whipping the Republicans to vote together. And then a lot of them don't like him. They don't have an incentive to like him, and they're kind of stuck with it. Like, he's the leader now.
Yeah, I think a great point that you made is, the idea that like Congress and, every political system really is so used to being behind closed doors and kind of shrouded in secrecy. Whereas like this was a great example of us seeing, that there's no dealing. This is what's happening. Everyone's just saying what they want. Matt Gaetz voted for Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. Like, it's just absolute chaos, and it's funny and also quite interesting to see what happens when it's sort of forced out and fleshed out, so that everyone can eye it. And I was wondering, so we've briefly touched on how there isn't really like a guiding voice for the Republican Party right now. You mentioned for the midterms, a lot of Trump's nominated candidates performed really badly. This sort of damaged what a lot of the more, I guess, traditional Republicans saw as Trump. I think it's the same as, to the British listeners, kind of like how conservatives saw Boris Johnson before they got rid of him, which is like, hey, he's a bit weird, but he can win us an election.
Right.
Whereas once his candidates don't win elections, then what's the point? You've just got a buffoon. And then DeSantis is trying to angle himself as well, but hasn't really taken over yet. How much do you think this affair was caused by or assisted by the fact that the Republicans don't really have a natural lead for the party who can sort of direct and angle things behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Like the fact that, the still leader of the Republican, and this kind of ties into going back, 2 years now, when they didn't want to accept the results of the election, first of all, that they lost. And so, if you look at Trump's track record, it's not that great. I mean, 2016, he beat Hillary by a sort of constitutional technicality because more people voted for Hillary. I mean, he did win the presidency, but more people voted for Hillary. Then the 2018 midterms, Democrats took control, Congress. 2020, he just loses outright to Biden. Then last year, all these candidates that he endorsed, during the election last year, you had, the Republican leaders in the Senate saying, these guys are all going to lose. Like, the people he picked to run for governor in like Pennsylvania, this guy, Doug Mastriano, who picked in Pennsylvania, was like an insurrectionist, conspiracy theorist. And like the Democrat, like literally the minute polls closed in Pennsylvania last year, it was like, boom, you've lost because you've nominated an absolute crazy person.
Yeah.
So his track record sucks. But the problem for the Republicans is that like no one still is really directly challenging him, and he's a former president, so he sort of has the microphone. So he's still technically the leader of the party. Like Mitch McConnell's not the leader of the party. Kevin McCarthy's not the leader of the party. It's Donald Trump. And so when you have a leader, like you guys experienced, when you have a leader that's a loser, but I think the difference is like, as the conservatives in the UK eventually just threw Boris out, whereas Republicans, they're still kind of reluctant to kick Trump to the curb. Like we're going to see over the next 2 years to come now whether they have enough guts to do it. And I mean, I'm still a skeptic when it comes to that. Like when McCarthy won the speakership in the middle of the night, one of the first people he thanked for winning it was Trump, right? So it still shows that like they have this obedience to Trump, and they learned over the last couple of years, like they all bend the knee to Trump because for them, even though it's not necessarily an overall popular thing, right? Like Trump has never been popular with Democrats, obviously. he's not really been popular with, voters in the middle. And even with some Republicans, he hasn't been popular, but he's been pretty popular within the party.
Yeah.
And they're so oriented with things like Fox News and right-wing radio around feeding that base of the Republican Party, is that like they don't know how to do anything other than that.
Right.
So because the base fervently loves Trump, you end up with most of the leaders, and McConnell aside, most of the leaders still kissing Trump's ass, even when Trump is losing elections. And I mean, it's one of these things where I, as a liberal, try to tell people on our side, like, don't get too cocky, but it's kind of hard not to sometimes, because you just look at the raw numbers of this and it's like, are you guys going to follow this guy off the cliff? It doesn't seem like a good strategy. And 2016 taught me to never get too cocky about these things. But on the other hand, like, like even DeSantis is starting up his campaign now, because he just won. I live in Florida, and he just crushed the Democrats here. Like, I think he won by like 16 points, like just total decimation, easy win for him. He ran up the score basically. So his package to the party now is, I can win. I dominate the state of Florida. Florida is really important to us, and so he's gonna challenge Trump, but he still hasn't even he hasn't directly challenged Trump yet.
Yeah.
Even though Trump has gone after him more than he's gone after Trump. Trump came up with a new nickname for him, which is always a sign that Trump's going after you.
It was DeSanctimonious, wasn't it?
Yeah, sanctimonious. Which, I mean, just as like theater criticism in Trump, like, I follow Trump a lot, and like that is probably one of Trump's weakest nicknames for anybody. Like, I still like Little Marco myself.
So if you'd like to see more of this, there's a link right above our heads right now where me and my friend, we ranked the best political insults in a tier list. Little Marco was top tier. I'll give you that now. It's amazing.
The sanctimonious, it just doesn't roll off the tongue. And but the thing is, that was interesting to me about when Trump pulled that out, like, DeSantis didn't respond. Like, he didn't give it any oxygen, which might be smart, because if you looked at like 2016 with people like Ted Cruz and the rest of them, when they punched back at Trump, you can't win that fight, right? Like, if on that territory, he's still the best in the Republican Party at the whole throwing insults things, and he knows that the base is with him. They like that crap, and so that's I think that's where they are right now when it comes to that part of it.
Yeah, I think a slight tangent. You said that, in the UK, our equivalent of Trump, Boris, he got kicked out. And I think it's definitely a quirk of our two systems, and also the fact that I think it's a combination of, so we have a parliamentary system, the MPs, the elected who are elected by constituents, they have power over the party. So like, we don't vote for the prime minister, technically, prime minister's representative, and the party chooses one. I'm sure you know that, just for the audience. But and the fact that Boris was still in power meant that there were mechanisms to kick him to the curb.
Right.
All you needed were numbers. Whereas it's a combination of, one, if Trump's president, you can't kick him out. He's president, unless you're going to impeach him, but they're never going to do that. But two, he's not in a position of power officially.
Right.
So there is no way to kick him to the curb and go, okay, he's not a problem anymore. Because if you try to do that, then your entire Republican base, who love him, he still has a platform. He can still dominate the news cycle any moment he wants.
Exactly. There's no official party leader position like in the UK, right? Like, there's no, other than when you're the nominee of the party, but like he's in that like weird, he's in that weird space right now where he's I guess you'd say, like, spiritual leader of the party.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
But he's not in the official capacity. He's not even, he's not party chairman, even though the party chairperson right now, Ronna McDaniel, is his hand-picked person for that position.
Yeah.
But like, even that position doesn't have a whole lot of power like in your system. That position is just sort of, that's just a functionary to like get money to candidates. Like, that's not a real ideological person, even though she is Trump's hand-picked person. So it's in this weird thing where, like, the most that they can do is like ignore him. And Mitch McConnell tries to do that a lot. Mitch McConnell tries so hard to do it. And like, if he wasn't a loathsome, husk of a man, I would have sympathy for him in that department. But like, McConnell tries a lot to pretend that Trump doesn't exist. But then even when he does that, Trump says like racial slurs about his wife, who happens to be Asian.
Yeah.
And, like, and he, right now, apparently, I just read a story where Trump is soliciting people to run against McConnell, in his home. And like it's one of those things again where like I keep trying to temper even my own optimism where I'm like,
Mm,
are you going to pick one of these like crazy MAGA people to run against Mitch McConnell in
yeah.
Kentucky? And I'm like, because like Kentucky is like it's a no-win territory for Democrats. Like the last
Mm.
time someone ran against McConnell, I think we lost by 20, 30 points. Like
Wow,
no
jeez.
chance in hell.
Yeah.
But then you look at it and you're like, well, if they nominate a
Yeah.
crazy, even in Kentucky, like that gives the Democrat a strange opening. Like
Yeah.
if you look at the Arizona governor's race, right? Carrie
Mm,
Lake, who Trump, like that was Trump's number one pick basically in the last election.
yeah.
And she was a complete crazy, and she was running against a kind of, you know, down the middle Democrat, not super exciting, but just sort of a regular Democratic
Yeah.
opponent,
Very
Katie
standard.
Hobbs. And Katie Hobbs ended up winning that race. And now Carrie Lake has been running around saying that, she really won. And she's been at Mar-a-Lago for the last month saying she won. And so you look at the sort of thing where like they can't get rid of this thing that's dragging them down.
Mm,
Because if you look at the two things that's dragging the Republican Party down right now, it's their opposition to abortion rights and Donald Trump. I think those
yeah.
would be the two biggest. There's a lot of other things, but those are the two biggest things. And those are the two things that they can't really get rid of because of their base. Their base is very anti-abortion and
Hmm.
very pro-Trump. And it's like, you know, the Democrats have a lot of problems, but by comparison, they're, like I said, with the leadership election,
Definitely.
there's a lot more unity. There's a lot more support for Biden. Like there's all kinds of issues with, Biden coming up towards this election, talk about his age and the fact that like, just the way he executes in office. Although I would say I'm personally more pleased than I was expecting. Like 2 years ago when we spoke, I did not
Definitely. Yeah.
as much out of
Yeah.
Biden as we've had the last 2 years. Like, I'll be perfectly blunt. I was expecting, the American Rescue Plan, which was this big, post-election
Yeah.
legislation. I was like, that's all I was expecting. And
The
I mean,
same.
he's passed like 4 or 5 pretty major bills since
Hmm.
then that are
Yeah.
huge. I mean, like biggest
Mm.
climate investment in U.S.
Yeah.
history from,
Yeah.
your moderate center-left Democrat.
And if it wasn't for like Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin,
Yeah,
it would have been
exactly.
even better.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same. I went back and I watched part of the podcast we did, and I'm very similar. I've got my Bernie jumper on if
Right.
anyone's interested. But I was very much like, okay, I'm very impressed by what's happening. I think for a progressive person, I was optimistic, but that
Right.
still meant I was very cynical.
Yeah, for
Whereas I
sure.
think I'm sort of more like, okay, there's actually been some good stuff. I'm kind of liking it. I've
Right.
also enjoyed him getting a bit weird with it, getting a bit
Right.
mean. That's been fun.
And that's the kind of thing that I especially when it comes to the non-policy part, the attitude part, that's the
Mm,
part that I like the most because
definitely.
that was always my biggest issue with Biden. I personally like Biden, but he's a very historically a very just down the middle kind of guy. He's everybody's uncle, right? And that has been to his
Yeah.
benefit and his detriment for most of his political career.
Hmm.
But every once in a while he goes to the dark side, which is
Yeah.
to
He
me
goes
the
to
good
Dark
side,
Brandon.
right? Yeah, Dark Brandon, is and he'll hit the Republicans a little, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, Joe,
Yeah.
you've got that in there, like
Look at him go.
the big effing deal Biden is still in there. Like he still wants to come out and play
Yeah.
sometimes. And
Yeah.
that's always when, his base, among Democrats gets the most excited because, it's always been interesting to me over the years where like Republicans, when they went with their id, like what is your gut? What is,
Mm,
who do you want? Like, don't worry about the, calculating election results, this and the other, with
yeah.
someone like Trump, right? Which is a total screwball.
Mhm.
And when Democrats did that, like I would say, if you look at the last 40 years of the Democratic Party, like when did the party just say, fuck it, let's just go with our guts? Who are we going to go with? It was Barack Obama, right?
Yes.
Who
Versus
and
Hillary, the most like traditional
right,
Democrat.
right. Which on paper, like Obama is not a crazy radical. He's a regular center left Democrat,
Yeah.
but that was who they went with. So like when with Biden, it's kind of the same thing where you kind of got the Obama policy, but with less of the dynamic speaking and personality type.
Yeah.
And when Biden like tempts that dark side, in the last few months of the election last year, he went after the Republicans for this plan that Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, who's the head of the Republican Electoral Committee, he
Mm,
came out with this really cockamamie plan to basically would end up cutting Social Security was the bottom line of it, right?
Right.
Which is no party does that in America. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. And even like Mitch McConnell like tried to run away from it immediately,
Yeah, wow.
right? And but Biden like started making these speeches, and he pulled out like Rick Scott's plan,
I remember
and he's
that.
like leaning on the podium and talking trash about it. And I love wrestling, and I'm like, hell yeah, like bring Dirty Biden. Like I love Dirty Biden, right? Like I love this version of Biden.
Yeah.
And every time he pulls it out, and like if he wants to run in 24, like that's the Biden that can get people like excited again and like make them forget about all these problems.
Yeah. That's the thing. Sometimes you look Biden in the eyes and you go, if he was like on one of those like American, like they go to a school trip and they like meet them, and some kid was like, oh, I like Donald Trump, he would tell them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's what I want. That's hilarious.
Right.
Like
right. And that's the thing with the the gaffes. Biden is famous over his very long political career of making these gaffes, but it's one of these interesting things to me where like his history of making these gaffes actually has been helping him as president, because it's almost priced in now where sometimes, he'll say something and it'll be an off note and people have to come in and kind of clean up for him. But it doesn't really hurt him, right? And like for other politicians, this would hurt them. Like if Barack Obama came out and made a gaffe like what Biden sometimes does, it would hurt Barack Obama, because Barack Obama has this image of very polished, very on it. Barack Obama's not going to make mistakes like that.
Yeah.
But when Joe does it, like again, it's that thing. Like I'm not saying Biden does it. It's Joe. It's like it's Joe.
Yeah, that's what he does.
It's Joe.
Yeah.
It's Joe. People like that, And it's one of these things where you see the Republicans and they're fumbling for like they're trying to like Biden gaffes.
Yeah,
Biden's just like, I'm immune.
I don't care. Because it's the flip side of the same thing that people, voters, anyone kind of have like a bar of like forgivability, and you can easily push that up if you just add a bit of a wacky like tax, and you say someone like Trump, someone like Boris Johnson, like they can get away with more because that's just what they are. They're a bit goofy.
Right.
Whereas rather than Trump and Boris being like outwardly like silly and like having funny hair and being like funny, Biden's is like, oh, he just trips up sometimes and you just gotta move on with that. He's gonna fall off his bike and you go, that's fun.
Right. Right. Exactly. And people kind of, people sort of actually like that because, and that is one of the things that it's been hard historically for Democrats to kind of crack, because, you look at sort of Democratic candidates like John Kerry and Hillary Clinton, they try to be so perfect, right? And they try to go to this like this, and unless you're Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, you're never going to really be that guy. And even Bill Clinton, for obvious reasons, was not that guy. But generally speaking, when you're running for office, that guy, that woman. But like people don't. They say they want that.
Yeah, they don't want
that. But if you look at the way that they vote, they don't want that. I mean, that was one of the great skills that George W. Bush had over Democrats when he was running. It's the, in the U.S., you talk about it's the, would you want to have a beer with that person kind of thing.
It's the classic.
Yeah. And like,
same here, which is like if you have a pint with them.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like back in 2004, you had, John Kerry, who on paper was this great candidate, was, he's a veteran. He was a senator. He looks like a president, right? That was one of the big selling points. Like you look at him, you're like, oh, he looks like a, if you build you play these games like I do. Like if you built a character in a game, president, it would look like John Kerry.
Yeah. I would if you put him in a lineup, I'd probably guess, oh, was he like between like Taft and someone else?
Right,
like, the ones you don't really know, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. If you show someone like a lineup of presidents, and you put John Kerry in there, I bet 90% of people would be like, "Oh yeah, he was president, right?"
Yeah. Wasn't he like four of them ago?
Yeah. Exactly. And so when he ran against, George W. Bush, who we used to make fun of all of these malpractices from George W. Bush, and like we're like, but he's dumb and he can't talk right. How can you vote for him?
One of the funniest ones in the world ever. It was like, fool me once, shame on me.
Yeah.
Fool me twice. No, was it fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Can't get
shame on
again.
Woo. Shame on you again.
Yeah, and and like I remember, he's one of my least like people ever in history, but like
awful person.
He had this one, he had a speech one time where he talked about OBGYNs can't share their love, right? But like every time we would try and like attack him over that was the kind of crazy crap that people liked. They're like, oh, he's like me. I remember this is sort of a tangent, but one time when he was at the Olympics, I think this must have been in, oh God, what year was it? I guess it was the 2008 Olympics. And I was watching it with my mother, and he was, he's not running again.
Yeah.
And he was there, talking to like one of the hosts or something and just hanging out. And even I had to say, my mom and I were talking about it, and I was like, if he wasn't president, he seems like a pretty nice guy to hang out with, right? Like someone that, and I'm like, and that was the kind of moment it clicked in my head. I was like, oh, no wonder this guy is winning like that. And then so you fast forward to now, and Biden is kind of in that role where like people look at him and they're like, on paper, people are like, oh, but he, sometimes people on our side are still in that mindset of like, oh, he made a mistake and the Republicans are going to make fun of him. And I'm sort of been saying lately, like, relax. People are cool with it.
Yeah.
Like unless it's something like super egregious at this point, and especially coming off of the Trump presidency, where like his, like when Trump makes a quote unquote mistake, it's racist, it's misogynist.
His mistakes are like, oh, I accidentally called Nick Fuentes a good person.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if he actually did that, but it's like that's the kind of thing, you know what I mean?
Right. And when Biden makes a mistake, it's just like, it just comes across as harmless now. It's just like, oh, it's Joe. Yeah, whatever. People, the economy's going okay, unemployment's down. Joe can talk whatever he wants to. He's not going to nuke, a hurricane.
Yeah. Yeah, I always call it like, because it's those sort of mistakes are like, it's being human, like if you try and be utterly perfect, people are going to try and spot the holes in you because you're trying to be perfect. But if you're just trying to be, oh, I kind of stumble sometimes, I'm just trying to do the right thing. I don't know, American people will kind of go, okay, they're less inclined to point that out. But so do you think but now we're talking about Biden's human side, do you think he's going to run at the next presidential election? And if so, what would happen if he doesn't, or if he does, who else is there?
Yeah, I mean, I hate making, like, it's funny, after 2016, I hate making predictions because like
famously it's a horrible thing to ask someone to do, but I'm waiting.
No, it's legit.
I'm joking.
Yeah, right. But like, so right now, my gut would say right now that I think he's going to run again. Right? Like, I think that he's going to run again. I think because he has so much legislative success in his first basically 2 years at this point, and like right now he's got this Republican Congress that he's going to be basically running against, which sets up a good contrast for him, right? Like they're going to be doing all sorts of crazy things, like when they're not fighting amongst themselves, they're going to be pushing a lot of these conspiracy theories. They're going to have all these hearings. They're talking right now about like, bringing the FBI to talk about crazy conspiracy theories. And like, it just sets up a good contrast where like he can be, I'm Joe, I'm running the country. I'm very normal. I'm pretty boring. Like I'm not crazy. Things are getting better. I'm investing in the things that you like. And the Republicans over here doing the craziest stuff, right? So that sets up a good contrast for him. So I feel like on that measure, it like the one thing I would say, is his detraction is his age, right? Like that's always the biggest concern. But if you put that one aside, which granted is a significant one, but if you put it aside, like if Joe Biden was 10 years younger, I would say slam dunk he's going to run again.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I feel like the age is the only one that is, sort of pushing him against running. Now, if he doesn't run, it'll be chaotic to a point. I mean, the number one contender will be Vice President Harris. Like that's a gimme. Like, I'm just saying, like,
I'm just saying, like, that's my natural, like,
and I get that.
I'm not saying that she's good or bad. I'm just mean like, because she's so unpopular, I struggle, and she hasn't really done anything.
Right.
Like, she was the person I was going to ask. Like, do you think if Biden stepped aside, do you think she instantly be like, right, hi, put me in there, or will she kind of go, well?
She definitely, I mean, she's going to run, whether it's this year or 4 years from now. She's going to run, right? Sure. Like she's not in that position to just have been a vice president, right? She ran, 2 years ago. Like she's in the prime position, like on paper, like
no, of course,
merit of whether she can win or not. Like just on paper, she's in the perfect position to run.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, I don't think if Biden, this scenario where if Biden decides not to run and she chooses to run, I don't think it clears the field in a way that, like, maybe if you go back to when Gore decided to run, that sort of, I mean, he had a challenger with Bill Bradley, but Gore basically had a glide path to
Sure.
the nomination. I don't think her path will be as clear. Or if you go back to like, George H.W. Bush after Reagan's presidency, like I don't think the path will be as clear for her. And I think a lot of other people, and definitely a challenger from the left, like I don't think Bernie, but someone from that,
he
that,
might try and
yeah,
push
and you have
someone.
the governors, you have a few of the governors that are setting themselves up to run. You have the governor of California, governor of Illinois. They've both been sort of positioning themselves. And people have historically preferred governors over senators to be nominated for president. And so I don't necessarily think you're going to have like the huge scrum that we're going to have on the Republican side, where they're sensing this weakness from Trump already. And like, I mean, there's probably at least, I can't go get them all in my head right now, but there's at least 10 people that I think are going to run this next time, which helps Trump, to be honest. But on the Democratic side, like it's not going to be wide open field, but it's not clearing the field for Harris, even though she would probably be the theoretical front runner until things start going. So
okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. So on the sort of the Republican Party, we talked about that a lot before, but one thing I'm really interested in learning more about from you is, so we've spoken a lot about like the Republican Party's divisions. They're lacking a real leader. Trump and DeSantis at the top level, but something that we really saw from the McCarthy situation, we saw the free names, the sort of like wackos of the Republican Party right now, the really far right people. The three that come to my mind are always Gaetz, Boebert, and Magic the Gathering, otherwise known as Marjorie Taylor Greene. I can't refer to her as MTG without thinking of Magic the Gathering.
Same.
It's fine. We can move on. A very nerdy political podcast here today.
Sure.
We're cool. But yeah. And I'm interested in, so first of all, if you could give like a little overview of what these people are like, what is so insane about them. But specifically what I'm interested in, and I can ask a follow-up as well, is why Gaetz and Boebert, two insane people, were very anti-McCarthy, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, arguably the most insane person. Oh, that's Kal-El, everyone, the dog.
Inevitable.
That's okay. It was going to happen.
Good boy.
But yeah. But then Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone who seems to have associations with like QAnon and really crazy conspiracy stuff, arguably the most insane, was pro-McCarthy. So like, if you can give a sort of summary of this like new wave of like the far right in the Republicans and why they seem to be split, I'd be really interested to hear about it.
Well, I can't say for sure, but like my gut feeling with why Greene, Magic the Gathering, decided to support McCarthy is that it was finally her chance to get some real power, right? I mean, because under the Democrats, she had all her committee positions stripped from her because she pushed this sort of anti-Semitic conspiracy theory about the Jewish space lasers, right? Like she was completely toxic, and even to the point where like even Republicans had to be at least give lip service to the fact that okay, yeah, you can strip her of her committees, right? And for your viewers, like she literally was like, she couldn't even be on a committee in Congress, which is, that is sort of the lowest of the like. Basically, what do you do if, like, other than voting on legislation? What are you actually doing in Congress? Because even if you're not on like one of the main committees, you generally get to be put on like a subcommittee for something.
Yeah,
she was like stripped of that completely. So in the hearings that like basically make the news on television, where people are interviewing people and questioning people, she was not able to do that. Whereas like Boebert and Gaetz were both members of committees, even in the minority, like famously, Boebert did a committee hearing where she had guns, behind her in a committee hearing, right? And Gaetz was pushing these conspiracy theories. He was on the Judiciary Committee. He was pushing these conspiracy theories about the FBI being involved in the January 6th attack, right? And so those are huge, prominent things for especially people like them who want to get, and goes back to the main reason of why they're empowered. Their ecosystem is very different from a lot of other representatives, even in the Republican Party, because they're in these districts that are basically designed to elect Republicans. I mean, Matt Gaetz had all these bad stories come out about over the last 2 years. And literally, as the polls closed in Florida, he won that race by, I don't remember how much it was, but it was not even close. It was probably like 30+%, right? So he basically hardly even had to run a re-election campaign because most of the voters in his constituency, and granted, this is true for about 80% of both parties.
Yeah.
they're just going to vote for the Republican, right? Like it could be Joe Republican running in a seat, or Jill Democrat running for most of these seats.
Yes.
There's no incentive to really do much of anything, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So once you win these races, once they won a primary for these people, and they both have such high name recognition, it's very rare someone's going to challenge them, because no one's going to say that they're.
Mhm.
I mean, it's pretty hard to get to the right of Matt Gaetz, other than like
it's hard to outcut him in any way,
right? Right? So the system is designed for people like the three of them to like just get media hits, right? And like this is like their whole life is it's a strange thing where like, because we think that, oh, we're sending people to Congress to pass legislation to advance an ideological agenda. And this is true of both parties. Like you have Republicans that like, oh, they're in Congress to pass legislation to, enhance gun rights and to cut taxes. But like these guys, yes, they support these things, but they're not really there for that. They're there for, media hits. And it's just strange, because it's like, why are you in Congress then? Why are you just not like a shock jock, YouTube host? No offense to you, but like,
hey, we're very important. No, but totally. No, I totally agree.
And I mean, that's the funny thing. Like Matt Gaetz specifically, Matt Gaetz is like actually competing with you, Hugh, more than he is with members of, because he has a YouTube channel. He has a YouTube channel where you look at his stills, and you compare it to your channel. I look
on
at
the screen now.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, Matt, he's like pointing and he's doing all these, like, it's just like a regular YouTube channel, but he happens to be a member of Congress.
Does he do
the
like?
Yes. He even has like a Gaetz hot seat. Yeah. It literally, I'm telling you, look at it and you'll feel the competition from the Gaetz, And this is, and Ted Cruz is doing crap like that too. And like, why are you in Congress? And so that is the thing. That is the incentive for them to sort of. This was the whole problem that McCarthy had, because how do you appeal to a politician that is not driven by normal political desires, right? He's not asking for money for a bridge in Florida. He's not asking for a committee assignment, so that he can push stuff that people in Florida care about. He's just in it for the lulz, right? And the lulz for him was making Kevin McCarthy look like a dum-dum.
Yeah.
Like his incentive is to make Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden look stupid. And so how do you appeal? That's like, it's like Batman and the Joker, right? It's like some men just want to see the world burn.
Yeah.
Right? And so even with Gaetz, not Gaetz, sorry, with MTG, like yes, she wants to be on these committees, but she's a loose cannon too for McCarthy. She's not going to line up and be a good little foot soldier for him. You already see it happening. Like, she doesn't really care about this agenda either. She's posting all kinds of crazy YouTube and Twitter videos. Yeah. So all of them, it's this incentive system of they just want to get a YouTube hit. They want to go viral. They want to be a TikTok star. They just happen to be members of Congress.
Yeah, I get that. I feel like I think I have a similar analysis in terms of that's their strategy, but I think they do have an end goal in mind, which is that. So I see them, especially MTG and Gaetz. I don't know as much about Boebert, but I assume she's around almost of the same ilk.
Yeah.
That they're just like fascists, and they just want to implement, horrible fascist policies against gay people, trans people, black people, anyone and everyone who isn't exactly like them. But they realize that those things, at least in the current political climate right now, are so insane. They're not going to get voted in the next Congress. So what's the point of trying to get them electoral power when they can build their profile, cause more drama, tear down the system a little bit, one piece at a time? It's almost like it's the activity of like a revolutionary. It's like you look back to like, early Russia and like the different, political groups in their sort of equivalent of a parliament. And it was like you had the revolutionary communists who their entire strategy was just like, we're just kind of fucking around.
Right.
Like, not to the same extent, but it's a similar kind of like, we're not really trying to pass day-to-day bills. We're trying to be here because it's a platform.
Right. I would say, I would even go further than you. I would say they're like the Nazis.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
They're like the Nazi party, where it's just like, oh, we're not actually in the, German parliament to get, we don't want to form a center-right coalition.
Yeah. That's honestly, that's a better comparison. I think mine was a little bit esoteric. The best comparison is Nazi Germany in the Weimar in the
Yeah.
Weimar Republic.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like and if you look at the Weimar Republic, like they weren't there to, the center right parties used to come to the Nazis and say, "Oh, let's form a coalition with us."
Yeah.
And the Nazis were like, "Screw you. We just want to kill Jews."
Yeah.
Right? And I mean,
It's true.
they literally just would screw around, and they had their, you had your the brown shirts on the street. Well, the Republicans have the Proud Boys on the street.
Yeah.
And like I mean, yes, sometimes it's a cliche for people, on our side of the aisle to say that, but like, sorry, sometimes parallels are parallels, and you can't avoid them. And so, yeah, you look at these guys, like, as you said, they're not there to actually form governing coalitions toward,
Definitely.
eventually getting to some goal. They're like, yeah, if we can just screw around with the system until we get our fascist dictator, and
Exactly.
so, and you look at they looked at Trump as like, oh, look, Trump is our vessel for that, but it's not like, it's very Trump centric, but at a certain point, you even had, Gaetz, who is the Trump do boy, defying Trump when it comes to McCarthy, because Gaetz understands, I think, it's a funny thing because yes, they're strategic, but yes, they're also stupid.
Yeah.
But it's one of these things where like Gaetz understands the strategy enough where like, oh no, I don't really need to be Trump's do boy when it comes to this thing. Like, my incentive is not to support the quote unquote establishment of the party. It's just to screw around, right?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
and look, if you look at, I'm sure if you polled the constituents in his district right now, and I saw a poll just today actually that said, oh no, we like screwing around with McCarthy among Republicans. This isn't even like, oh, sitting back with popcorn like I was, like enjoying it. Like, this is Republicans saying, oh no, we like you screwing around with McCarthy too, because we just want to screw up the system. And you go back, again to Brexit, go back to Trump. Yeah. It's just this group of people internationally that just want to, oh yeah, just screw it up. Just,
just
fuck
screw
up.
them. It's funny. No, totally. It's a great analysis. I think, it boils down so clearly around Jan 6, that the insurrection attempt is just so clearly the fact that, they're quite supportive, but then the only time they're not supportive is when they go, it's Antifa or it was the FBI. It's such a terrifying visage that, like, they could just be in Congress just to wait for another one of those and then say,
oh yeah,
they're over there. And that is a terrifying thing. And this is a little bit of a steer off, and if don't want to talk about something like this, just say. But we recently saw in Brazil there was a kind of similar Jan 6, obviously not on Jan 6, but where Bolsonaro supporters stormed government buildings. And I was wondering how much you think that has potentially been inspired by the US, and whether we might be seeing a trend of right-wing parties, which have turned into far right-wing parties, just consistently normalizing and engaging in these grand acts of violence.
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure. Like, when I saw the footage from Brazil, it's impossible to look at that footage from Brazil and not compare it to what happened here on Jan 6. Like, I mean, it was one of these really weird, like, almost frame for frame, it looked like what happened here in the US. And so, and the fact that you have people like Steve Bannon, who is Trump's former chief of staff, basically egging on and supporting the Bolsonaro people. And, one side note is that, like, living here in Orlando, Bolsonaro is actually here right now. Like,
I know.
He's like, I could literally run into him at the supermarket. There was footage of him hanging around Publix, which is a supermarket here. He was just walking around at a Publix. Yeah. And so I was joking. I'm like, I could go with, Cal and go to the Publix and get into Bolsonaro.
How many hospitals do you have roughly in your area?
There's not many. I mean, there's about, like, I mean, I was in
He's definitely at one of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was at the hospital last year. I had to go in for procedure last year. And when I saw that he was at the hospital, the first thing I checked, I was like, did he go to the same one as me? It turned out that he didn't, but it's not that far away from the hospital where I was.
Crazy.
So, like, to go back to the main point, it's like, you look at, like, there is this international network of right-wing fascism that has been working with each other over the last few years. You had the Brexit folks in the UK. You had the folks the parliament election in where was it? In Italy.
Italy. Italy. Yeah, Hungary for a long time with Orban.
Yeah, and you did, Greece had
almost like Sweden as well. The Swedish Democrats, who are a bit confusing for what we've been talking about. The Swedish Democrats are a far right party as well. Right. They were like Nazis like 20 years ago or something ridiculously soon.
Yeah, and you had the Golden Dawn
Golden
in
Dawn in Greece, that was like 2014.
yeah, and it's like you look at this and like and then you compare it to the quote unquote MAGA movement here in the
Mm,
US, and it's not I don't like sometimes I feel like I don't want to say that it's a conspiracy because it's like no, these guys all have the same end goals because
mm,
going back again to 1940s Europe, and you're looking at like Italy, Germany, and Japan, and
yeah.
you're like, well, there was an alignment, right? And like I don't know what the end game is going to be, but like
Mhm.
they all of these have this sort of, and again, you look at even Russia, right, where they have this sort of Christian nationalism that is supported by the far right here in America, by
Mhm.
the far right in Brazil, and
Yeah.
they increasingly they don't have any compunction about just attacking democratic government like that used to be a taboo. It seems strange
Yeah.
to say, right? Like it used to be a taboo to
Yeah.
pick up arms against your government, and it's almost like this thing where the Overton window is sort of shifting on it,
Mhm.
where at the same time I almost want to say, and it's a weird sort of thing because you worry about the sort of establishment center left parties and their response to it. Like you don't want to go full on like let's all have a war with each other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That is a bad situation. But then you also look sometimes at the reliance of like the Democratic Party and I would say the Labor Party of like
Mhm.
relying on the rules and the system
Yeah.
against a movement that
Doesn't give a
doesn't
shit.
give a crap about the
Yeah.
system, right? And it's almost this we're at this point right now where maybe that is not the majority, even though Trump is sort of in that mindset. Like I would say the majority of Republican voters are not there, and
Mhm.
like the majority of the like conservative voters in the UK are not there. But
Yeah.
is that going to be true 10 years from now? Right? Like,
Totally.
we're not going in the right direction,
Mhm.
and I almost feel like I keep feeling like these elections, when Biden won and, basically I feel like, knock on wood for you guys, if maybe Labor can figure their crap out, like if the center left parties still win, I almost feel like every election always feels like it's the last election before the collapse. And
Yeah.
and that was the motivation, going back to our election last year. Like you literally had the president of the United States, Biden, saying democracy is on the ballot, and it's not. This was not political hyperbole. Like
Yeah.
you
It
had
actually
people,
was, which is what's
yeah,
so insane.
yeah, and lucky for us, it motivated some group of people. Like there were a group of people that weren't motivated by other factors that
Yeah.
said, "Oh, I need to vote so I don't live in a
Yeah.
fascist super."
Like record young people like turning out
Yeah,
the midterms. I believe it was the midterms, yeah. Just because at some point it's gonna reach them. This is happening.
right, right, and especially like with things like trans and LGBTQ rights,
Yeah.
that is directly affecting young
100%.
people. And the Republic, go back to DeSantis. DeSantis is going to run for president on attacking transgender
Yeah,
kids. Like,
definitely.
and the party sees like the Republican Party seem to be at least giving lip service to moderating on these issues now, but now they're moving into like you look at the state legislatures in the U.S. It's almost like they want to ban being transgender in this
Yeah.
country,
Mhm.
and
No,
it
it's
again,
terrifying.
it's hard not to see the parallels with again Germany. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
there.
I mean,
It's
like in early like Nazi writing, like a lot of the things to target was like feminine men, and like
yeah,
and you look across the world, China's banned the presentation of feminine men.
Russia,
Russia has the same kind of rule where it's like you can't openly promote homosexuality or like femininity in from men, and it's terrifying to see like the kind of and I think a good subject to end this on will be the catch-all term of the word woke. I think that's one of the biggest things that's like progressed in the last 2 years. Woke was a word, but it wasn't the word. And I'd love to hear your analysis on sort of the Republican use of the word woke. I mean, I can't remember who it was specifically, but it's someone important in the Republican Party on Fox News the other day was saying like, "Oh, we need to cut the defense budget."
oh
And they're
yeah.
like, "Oh, because a lot of it is looking pretty woke to me." And it's like, wow,
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
it's one of these strange things because woke basically started as this term within the black community talking about opening eyes among white people to
Mhm.
being in favor of diversity and
Yeah.
equality, and like the whole idea was to make white people woke, so to be more sympathetic and understanding. And it sort of morphed into this thing where like woke is almost meaningless now.
Totally.
Woke has become this term that is just a catch-all for for the right. It's shit I don't like.
Yeah, it's
and
the
it
dog whistle.
it could be anything. It could be Black equality. It could be women's equality. Could be LGBTQ equality.
Yeah.
It could literally. I mean,
it can also just be like oat milk.
Yeah, it's literally anything I don't like. Like, okay, one of the funniest things that I've seen in the last year or so is Republicans attacking the military as having woke generals, right? The military. Now, I don't need to explain to you and your listeners that especially the American military, is the least woke thing in probably the history of humanity. It is it's the biggest, most powerful military in the history of mankind that could, if it wanted to, if it decided to go rogue tomorrow, like tonight, could literally destroy the entire planet, right?
You could just say, like America tomorrow could be like, you know what, like throw a dart at a map and be like, Nicaragua, that's not going to exist tomorrow.
Right, literally. And so Republic, like we there are a few programs in the military, and I wrote about this for the American Independent. There are a few programs in the military to increase diversity. And the funny thing is, if you talk to like real military scholars, the reason why they say they need to do that is to further the overall effectiveness of the military. It makes the military better at killing people.
More people, more killing.
Yeah, because guess what? If you want to have the best military, you pick from everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
As someone who, when it comes to military matters, has tended to be a little more militaristic than my fellow lefties, that's always been my argument. I'm like, oh, I want transgender troops because I want the best person out there killing, because I don't want a straight wimp like myself out there. I want a transgender soldier out there that's going to kill the bad guys, right? Like, to me, I'm like, oh, no, I want to open it up to everybody because they're much better killing machines. I'm like, if you only limit it to straight men, you're going to put wimps like me on the front line. Whereas, like, I know there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of women and transgender people that would be much more suited to military service than me. I just want the military to be better. And that's basically the military's argument with that, is like, if we put Black, Latino, transgender people in the military, we're going to have the best and brightest of everyone to make us a more efficient killing machine. But the Republicans look at that and they're like, oh no, you're weakening the military. You're making it woke. Exactly. And so you end up with these absurd arguments about, wokeness. And and I've seen it again across the pond, where like in the UK now, I see them talking about like woke this and woke that, and it's the same crap. It's just stuff I don't like, and it's a dog whistle, like you said, to just throw in there. And it's not even, you can't even really make a counter argument about it because it's so absurd, right? Definitely. It's like, it's one of these things where the liberal thing is to pick it apart and say like, you don't really mean that, and get real nerdy and wonky. And it's like, doesn't matter, dude. Like, they're just saying, it's words. It's just
so insane. Yeah. And in the UK, it's definitely increasing. I mean, like, especially in the Tory leadership, it's not as dominant yet. It's not like, because Rishi Sunak might say it as like a joke occasionally. I don't know if he ever has, but he's not really on it. But people like Kemi Badenoch was a big one. She ran for Tory leadership, and she's all about the woke stuff. Like at one of her campaign venues, they were gender neutral bathrooms, and they wrote on a bit of paper and stuck it on the thing to say male and female, which is just insane. And it's then
very American of them.
And Suella Braverman, who's currently runs the Home Office, which is like the immigration one, who's evil. Not a fan. She will often talk about like the wokerati and like the Guardian reading, soy eating. Like it's insane. And I think the best way to round this off would be if you can think of one on the spot, your favorite thing that's woke this year. As I have mine in my head, which was like, I think it wasn't a politician, but it was a American pundit of some sort. And they said, I took my kids to go see Santa this year. Went to go see a not woke Santa. And it was just a chubby white Santa.
Right.
And everyone's like, you just mean black, right?
Right.
Like, you just mean I made sure to take my kids to the whitest blue-eyed Santa I could find.
Well, I have to tell you my favorite thing, and it started up last year, but it's come back just actually literally today as I'm speaking to you. Fox News, which is our leading source, you guys have dealt with the Murdoch world for decades, and it's a thorn in our side. Fox News today has gone to war again against woke M&Ms.
They're doing it again. They brought it back.
Woke M&Ms are back because there's apparently I think there's a purple M&M, and like I don't think M&M's officially said it, but like Fox and the rest are interpreting that to be a transgender M&M. And also there's a picture of two female M&Ms holding hands. And so this was a thing on Fox News where they're very upset that M&Ms have gone woke again. Yeah. And so candy, last year it was Mr. Potato Head, and Mrs. Potato Head had gone woke. And now, so candy is the next frontier in wokeism, the wokerati. So the woke generals are employing woke M&Ms.
The sweets or the candy. No, yeah, I mean, the M&M one was definitely one of my favorites because it was so funny when you boiled it down to the first time. It was like, I think wasn't it the green one where they were like, I can't believe they made the green M&M not sexy anymore.
Yes.
How am I supposed to eat candy if I don't want to fuck it?
Pretty much.
And that was the whole controversy.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. Like it was the complaint that the green M&M is not sexy enough for me to have fantasies about it anymore. And how dare they? The liberal left has taken away my green M&M fantasies.
And it's like, and if that's what you think, go for it. You want sexy M&Ms? Do it. I love that. That's amazing. But it's just so funny. You watch them try to like dance around it when you just like, especially Tucker Carlson is doing his face like he's doing his like. So you're saying that we can't fuck it anymore? And that's what he does. I think we can end it on our Tucker Carlson.
That's the thing. It's not just a one-off comment. Like, they obsess. They're obsessed over it over and over. Yeah. It's messed up.
It's phenomenal. I mean, and there could be a whole nother podcast about, and maybe that will be the next one about the dominance of woke going forwards, because it is very funny, but there's also a lot of very serious political analysis to come under it. But at this point, it is time to say, Oliver, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. This has been great.
Had a good time.
I highly recommend that everyone goes reads your work at the American Independent, and Oliver's Twitter is now on the screen. It's probably been on the screen the whole time. And make sure you follow. There's a lot of great stuff on there. There's links in the description as well. Please go appreciate. And thank you so much.